Good morning, everyone. My name's Brendan Corboy. I'm the Incident Controller at the Shepparton Incident Control Centre. That's basically managing the flood response from this part of the world. Before we begin today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, their elders past, present and emerging, and anyone that may be in the audience here today or listening online. I think it's also important to acknowledge what we've been through over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of anxious times, a lot of nervous times, a lot of impacts to us all. I think COVID has really hit us all in different ways, both personally, professionally. It's been a rough couple of years. And then of course we get this coming in. This weather system that's coming at the moment, these climate drivers that are impacting us, a lot more uncertainty. And that creates a lot of emotion, a lot of nervousness, a lot of anxiousness. And those feelings are real, and they impact the way we talk and speak to each other, engage with each other across the community. But it's also a really great unifier. We've seen communities across the state get together and really prepare for floods. And we've got family and friends in Shepparton. I'm sure many of you here have done that. We've seen how hard they've done it. And there's a long way to go for those communities. The flood waters are one thing, but the clean up, dealing with insurance companies, all that type of stuff, it's going to be a long slog. It's years, really, in recovery for that. But I guess we're here today to talk about the risks here to the COBRAM community and the surrounds here. We live on a floodplain. It floods. It's just part of what we have to deal with. I always say the river actually owns the land. We kind of live on it, and we have to kind of manage the risks around that. One of the great challenges for the State Emergency Service or any flood response is that it's not like a fire that ends up burning out, or you can blow it out or you can put it out. With water on the floodplain, you just move one problem from one area to the other. And when you do that, you're impacting different people, different communities. It's a tough gig, I'm not going to lie. But it's something that we have to endure because it's where we live. Really important to note, folks, that at the moment, there's no major flood forecast for this community. Okay, really important to know that. But we've got these climate drivers happening. Okay, everyone's heard of La Nina? We've all heard of El Nino, because we all went through the drought and endured that. But La Nina's the opposite, very wet. That's all on the east coast. So a lot of moisture coming down the east coast from the tropics, coming down, hitting the Great Dividing Range, making it rain. This year's a little bit different. We've also got the negative Indian Ocean dipole, which is pretty much the same thing for the west coast, but instead of going down the coast, it comes across the continent. Comes all the way across, hits the Great Dividing Range, creates rain. So we've got both of these systems happening at the same time. There's only been 5 times since 1960 that it's happened, and each time we have major floods. Each and every time. So if you want to put money on something, we're going to cop it. Or at least we are copping it now. Whether or not that continues or not, your guess is as good as mine. Certainly hope it's not. Certainly hope it doesn't happen in this community. But we need to be prepared for it. And that's, I guess, why we're here today to talk about that risk. So at the moment we've got, I'll use analogy of 2012, because that was, or 2016, when the last sort of major floods sort of come through this area. A couple of different factors that are coming around this time around. We know the Dartmouth is full and spilling. That wasn't the case in 2016, 2012 area. We had capacity to sort of hold back flows. So in terms of the catchment, we've got Hume Dam that's being managed by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority at the moment. That's at 93%, or around about 93%. And they're trying to keep it that way for flood mitigation purposes. They'll fill it for the irrigation season because that's what their primary role is, to keep irrigation water for our community. But that extra little bit of headspace in Hume Dam does make a difference for us. And it's working quite well at the moment. Although that said, it does mean that there's higher river levels at the moment, and we're seeing that. It's at the minor flood levels sort of around this area, and it's been creeping up into the moderate flood levels over the last few weeks. And a lot of that is to manage that headspace in Hume Dam. And it does inconvenience people, we know that. So at the moment, the river at Tocumwal's at 6.3 metres, and at the moment it's just coming down a little bit. We're expecting that to stay a little bit steady over the next couple of weeks, as there's a bit of water coming down through Hume. At 6 metres and steady at Yarrawonga at the moment. So what's this incident seen in other parts of the area? Well, we have major flooding, very serious flooding through Seymour, Murchison, Shepparton, Euroa, Benalla, and now we're getting flooding that's coming through Nathalia. Not expecting that to get to the moderate level at Nathalia, so that's great news for them. We'll stay in that minor sort of level there. And we're not expecting to see the Murray River, sorry, not the Murray River, the Murray Valley flood levees constructed across there, which is great for that community. But we still do have that major flood that's sticking around Barmer. So we had the river actually flow backwards around Barmer for a couple of days. And all that water, there's been a lot of talk of the water backing up and coming up into COBRAM. That's not going to happen, folks, okay? The water backs up and it goes into the Edwards. So it goes into New South Wales and flows down that way. So that's happening at the moment. We're expecting the river to get down to a level below the levee bank in Barmer, probably in about 7 to 10 days. We're expecting that at the moment. But there's pumping operations happening out there. We've got a lot of water across the bottom end of the floodplain around that Broken Creek, Golden River sort of confluence area. It's wet for a lot of places. We've also seen some, I guess, overland flooding because we've had those storms that come through, dump a lot of rain very quickly, and the water just can't get away. So what we're seeing now is a lot of farmers are pumping into those drains, and they're backing up and flowing into some communities. And we had a little bit of an issue around Stratmerton last night, but speaking of Gold Murray water, the levels are dropping now, so that's not so much an issue. We know that there's issues with levees. Can I just get a rough indication of people that are concerned about levees? Put your hand up if you're willing. No? Got one there? Got a couple around? Yeah, we know that's an issue. I'm happy to talk to it, but so feel free to ask questions on any of that. I think in terms of an overview, it's really important to when we are protecting our houses, that we have our sandbag collection points, and our SES volunteers have got our pre-identified sandbag collection points around town for that to happen when we need to get there. We're not at that stage yet, but there are plans in place for that. Is everyone familiar with the local flood guides that we have? These documents, these I don't know if you've got a copy there, and you can hold up for us. We have these local flood guides, which are about 4 pages. It's got some really great information in there about what happens in your community when it floods, and it's a really short, sharp, quick way of showing what happens to your community and what you can do. There's also the municipal flood emergency plans, which goes into a lot of detail, and that detail talks about, at a certain level, this is what happens to your town. And it might actually list your street or a road that gets cut off at a certain level. It talks about at what level we start to put levee banks across the Murray Valley Highway. So there are actions in there that we're talking about. They're not state secrets, okay? They're community-led, community-driven plans that we have in place that an incident control centre executes when we are facing a flood emergency. I think that's probably it in terms of where we're at the moment. I might ask for any questions that we've got here. We've got representatives from Golden Valley Water, we've got representatives from Agricultural Victoria, we've got representatives from the Health and Red Cross here and our local SES unit and CFA up the back there. Sorry to throw you in it. If you do need to help, and it's probably worthwhile shouting out a big thank you to our volunteers. They give up their time for emergencies like this, and I know the local unit here not have just been working around their local area and the CFA. They haven't just been doing work around here. They've also been helping out in Shepparton, helping out in Barmer and around that space. So it's been a long time for us. Just for a bit of context, folks, we've been chasing weather events across Australia for about 3 years now. The climate is changing, we know that, and we're seeing significant consequences to communities all across Australia. We've been to Western Australia for cyclones up there, wiped out 75% from towns over there. So far down the coast that we've never seen it before. We've had flooding all up and down the east coast. We've had the biggest bushfires that the country's ever seen in the last 2 years. Throw a pandemic in there and it makes things interesting with water closures and the rest of it. So our volunteers and our staff, we've been on the go for a while, and it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon for us. So it's really important for us to make sure the communities are very well prepared, that you do have a flood plan in place. Can I just get a show of hands here who has a flood plan here? Of course, Deputy Controller, our VICSES volunteers have got one. May I just suggest to you, if you don't have one or if you haven't thought about doing one, now's the time to do it. Don't wait for a rainy day, because it'll be too late. What we're seeing at the moment, and I might get health, do you want to have a talk about some of the issues that we're seeing around Shepparton at the moment? Because they're things that you might not think about, but they're big issues that are happening in and around Shepparton at the moment. And these are direct consequences from flood and people not planning for what could happen to them. Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Ellen Brown from Department of Health. So some of the things that we are seeing that would be good to have a bit of a think about in the preparation and planning is around people unable to access medications. So if you're on medications, it's a good idea to have a conversation with your doctor and your pharmacist about having a good few days or weeks of supply with you. Just so if you do need to leave your home or relocate temporarily, you've got that. We're seeing a fair few people come through the hospital ED that have been unable to access medications for quite a few periods of time. So that would be really good to put into your plan. As most of you would be aware, mosquitoes are everywhere at the moment. So I'm really little, but I kind of feel they might pick me up and take me away. So just having a good think about our Beat the Bite campaign, making sure that you're covering up, you've got lots of repellent on you. As the stagnant water sits around for probably across this season for quite a little bit longer, the mosquitoes will increase. We do have quite a lot of planning going in with council around mosquito monitoring and that type of thing, but we will see an increase in them. I'm sure all of you have seen an increase in them in the last few months as well. So there's some of the key points, and obviously if we do see some flooding, to keep out of that flood water. I'm now seeing some gastroenteritis issues, so no one wants to face that. We've all had gastro before, it's not pleasant, so making sure we're keeping our hand washing and hygiene up as well is really key. So just some key things to have a bit of a think about when you're doing that preparation and planning. Any questions?
That's okay. I reckon I walked out of the ICC last night and ran into a mozzie, and I reckon he was going to ask me for my wallet. Is that big? But it's one of those things, and I was taken back a little bit just at the presentations for cardiac problems. People that were so focused on flood response and helping family and friends that they forgot to take their medication and go to the GP to get scripts renewed and all that type of stuff. So it's really important to have that prepared. I might just throw open to the floor now if anyone's got any questions. Look, I'm not the oracle, I don't have the answers to everything, but I'll probably know where to go to get the answers if I don't know it myself. So happy to throw it to the floor and answer any questions or concerns that you might have for myself or anyone that's present here today. Okay.
I just want to comment that I think the people that have been managing the dams up at Albury and so on have been doing a magnificent job in allowing the maximum amount of water down without causing too much problem. But the other question that I had is, as far as you know, unless there's a lot heavier rainfall than's already been predicted, this particular area is probably going to continue the way it is. That there's nothing urgent coming that you know of?
Yeah, look, totally agree that the Murray-Darling Basin Authority is doing a fantastic job mitigating the floods. But at the moment, we've got no concrete forecast as to any direct threat for this particular area. But we do know that we are in a floodplain. It's real flat. We know that. And historically, the biggest flood we had here was in 1916. Coincidentally, after a pandemic as well, just a bit of a coincidence. But yeah, that was a significant event that saw large spread consequences everywhere. But yeah, there's nothing here. When it comes to forecasting weather, sometimes you can get on the internet, you get on Facebook and people start to send you images of modelling that's 10 days out, 15 days out, all that type of stuff, and it always looks bad. Always looks really bad. But the reality is that the Bureau really only has solid forecasts out to about 4 or 5 days. They have these different computers that they run. There's about 8 of them that run different models, and what the models mean is that they just have different ways of calculating different things. And different models might show, a wetter fortnight than others. And generally what they do is they merge those models together and see where it lines up, and that's generally the forecast that they give. So what we do know is that it's going to be wet, but just how wet? Yeah, we don't really know till about, that 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, we'll get a heads up. And we had a week for this event because the models lined up early enough for us to say with certainty that this was going to be huge. And that's why you saw the Premier out, for about that 4 or 5 day mark before this event started. That's why he was out there saying this was serious, because the models had aligned and we had some level of certainty that something big was happening. But nothing immediately on the horizon for this part of the world. Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
There seems to be a problem in this area in particular with dairy farms gradually disappearing and turning into grain properties. What's the situation concerning farm planning and laser control? A lot of these, what were dairy farms, had dams, channels and so forth to get and remove water. A grain farm comes through, fills all the dams in, fills all the channels in. Is there a plan as to where that runoff goes? Because that's causing a problem around the area.
Yeah, look, and there's certainly been some, and I might just repeat the question just for the benefit of the video, if you don't mind, because they might not have picked it up. So the question was in relation to land planning and laser grading around the catchment and what impact that has. We always say that every flood's different. And the reason for that is that the floodplain changes, just for that, is that someone might laser grade a paddock and it diverts water somewhere else, or they might put in a simple gravel on your track, a driveway can have an influence on how water flows over the floodplain. I'm not going to make a comment on it because it's not my area of expertise. The Catchment Management Authority are probably best placed to do that, along with the council for planning. But yeah, any activity that we do on the floodplain has consequence. And that's the reason why we have planning permits and stuff like that. I know people talk about the bureaucracy of it, but for communities like this that's so flat, those type of things are really important, because anything that you do can have impacts for not just your neighbours, but for the community in general. But yeah, I guess that's as good as I can answer that one, sorry. Yep.
How can we access the
Municipal flood emergency plan. Yep, so if you go to access the municipal flood emergency plan, go to ses.vic.gov.au and look at, I think it's planning for emergencies, and you can type in the Moira Shire there, and it will come up as a downloadable link. The plan's pretty big. I think it's about 80 pages. But if you go to Appendix C at the back there, that has what we call our flood intelligence cards in it, and that has all the information I talked about before. I might have jumped the gun a little bit for local flood guides. I don't think we have one for COBRAM as yet. In development, we've gone to the higher risk communities first, and I guess you guys are really well defended here. But the municipal flood emergency plan is really good, and it does have that detail in it. Oh yeah, do you want to come up and have a chat? The Red Cross has got some great information about planning for, I guess, emergency kits, but I'll
Thanks very much. I'm Jessica Davison from Red Cross. You may see us Red Cross people out and about at the emergency relief centres or not, but if you need to go to one, you'll be greeted by Red Cross people, and they will direct you to different services and so on. So we're currently in the Shepparton Emergency Relief Centre at the moment. I am a bushfire recovery officer. I've actually been brought offline just to help with the flood response here in the broader Hume region. I've worked a lot with different impacted communities much further in the northeast, and what I've found is that the communities that have done really well through the bushfires are ones that are well planned themselves, and also with their families and also with their communities, and they've kept themselves really up to date with the information. So it's fantastic to see so many people here today just keeping informed about what's going on. And also adjusting any plans that they might have about whether they need to leave or move stock, all those kind of things. So great to see you here getting that information. To help with that, Red Cross has developed a couple of booklets, and I've got a bunch with me if it's helpful. You heard before about health with medications. So that's a prompt in our book, but there's lots of things to think about as prompts if you do want to leave or you do want to stay. So this has been developed from decades of experience from Red Cross, working with people before and after emergencies. Interestingly, one of the things we find is that it's always good to have medications, details about your passports, Centrelink details, all that kind of stuff. Really important to have, but what we find after, if houses are lost and that kind of stuff, it's actually things that can never be replaced, other things that really upset people. So also think about that too, whether that's a special jewellery or a book that someone gave you. Think about that when you're packing, if you need to. Just also want to say on being prepared. When you're prepared, that helps you make you feel calm. You've got a plan, and we all know when we're calm, we can think more clearly and act in a better way. There's nothing worse than being in a panic. And I'll tell you a funny story. We had a bushfire near us, and I was packing the car to leave. I had most of the stuff, and didn't have to leave in the end, so I unpacked the car, and I'd actually packed a blower, one of those blowers where you clean up leaves, and I thought, why on earth have I packed that? And it was actually a present my mum had just given me, and there must have been some connection there. So don't do what I did. Don't get in a panic before you need to leave. Think clearly about the special things that you need. Don't take that leaf blower. So I've got that booklet for adults. And I've also got a really lovely book for kids as well about getting kids prepared. Nice colouring in book, gets kids familiar with all the different types of emergency services and what they need to do in a disaster. So got lots of those. Come and see me, and I'm really happy to give you copies. That's it from me. Thanks very much.
I think one of the advantages of living where you live is that you'll get enough heads up that something's coming. Because we've got the Hume Dam, we've got all these regulative systems here And we'll have a good couple of days to prepare for something that's coming along. And if you've got a plan, and look, I grew up on a farm, and like to just do things my own way sometimes. But when you're put under pressure, sometimes it's good just to go back and have something that you've already pre-thought about. So if you live in town, I want you to start to think about this, because these are things that we've seen over the last couple of weeks around the state. If an evacuation notice happens where you live, what are you going to do? If you choose to stay, okay, that's fine, but you need to think about a couple of things. What's going to happen when the power goes out? Because when the power goes out, we can't get the power companies to the substations to fix it. We've got to wait for the water to go down, and that can take a while. What are you going to do if the water that you turn the tap on, what happens if that's not potable? You can't drink it. What happens if the sewage system overloads? Because we won't necessarily be able to go down and fix it. So your toilets might back up, your drains might overflow. That's why we ask people to evacuate. Things like that. If you live out of town, your septic tank's not going to work if there's water over it. If you've got an underground water tank, scrub that. So these are the type of things that people, we've got it really great in this country. We can turn a tap and have drinking water out of our house. That's amazing. That's incredible. And probably a hats off to Golden Valley Water. They managed to keep drinkable water in Shepparton and around the whole region during this event. It didn't fail once. There was a lot of planning that went into that for Golden Valley Water. Outstanding job. Yeah, we've had some drainage and some sewage issues in places, but all in all, that's an incredible achievement. It really is. But anything can happen in an emergency, and it's going to impact you. And we had people that, said, oh no, it's all right, I won't evacuate. And then a couple of hours later, they're calling us saying, oh, you need to come and get us. Well, I'm sorry, but we've got 200 other people that are in the same position here. We've only got so many rescue boats. It's not like the TV where we've got a helicopter for each house to come and rescue you. You might have to wait a little while, and that might be days before we can get to you, even in your town. Because resources only go so far in an emergency, right? So this is what we're saying. Communities need to be resilient, not reliant on emergency services. Because we just don't have the resources to be at every street and at every house. We have to accept that certain element of risk to your community, and you need to understand your own risk and know what you're going to do. If you live out of town, look, I've had to make my team's had to make a really hard decision yesterday, because we had a lot of farmers who put up levee banks around their properties and around crops and stuff like that. And very well intentioned, and I get it coming from a farming background. It's a tough gig. Farming's really tough, and you want to protect your crops and you want to protect your dairy farms and all that type of stuff. But the reality is, levee banks that haven't been authorised can stop the flow of water across the floodplain and keep roads closed for longer. And when roads are closed for longer, that puts life at threat. So we've made the decision yesterday to go and knock some of these levees down, just to get the water flowing across the floodplain, which is a crop. That's a livelihood, we know that. But we can't risk human life because we want to save a crop. And that's really tough. But it's the situation we're in.
Well, crops usually have houses. So
Yeah.
1 minute you're telling people to look after yourself, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And then, so they take the initiative to
Yeah.
look after themselves.
Yeah.
And then you screw them over by pulling down what work they do to save themselves.
No, I think there's a difference between what I'd call a bund around a house protecting residents and maybe a sheds. I think that's okay, and that's perfectly fine. We want people to do that. There's a difference between doing that around a house or a shed as opposed to a big block of land.
But that's their livelihood.
I understand that, and it's displacing water from one place to another, it's a tough gig, I know it, I get it, I really do. But we live on a floodplain, and it's part of the risk with it. I know that's really hard to grasp, and we've got communities all around the state, all around Australia, that are struggling with that. And we've got support in place, the governments of the day, and this isn't a political statement at all, but governments of the day do provide some support with that. And it's not going to be, everyone's going to have to take a hit. Everyone.
Well, that was in Echuca, what I understand happened in Echuca, that they had previous flooding and they were advised to build a levee. They were given funding for a levee, and then that funding was redirected to the port. Is that correct, or did I?
Look, I honestly, I don't know. I'm not in that, I'm in Hume region, that's in a different region for me, so I don't have intimate knowledge of it.
Well, maybe we should have someone who's from our region speak to us so they can answer our questions.
I am, I live in this region. I'm the operations manager for this region, that's outside of our region.
Oh, it's down the road.
It's down the road in another
Down
region,
the road.
madam.
You don't know what's going on in and around.
I know what's happening in my patch, and this is my patch.
So, sorry,
I'm looking after everyone, madam.
this man had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the standard of the levee banks, I know that levee banks are all being upgraded through the town area. Are all the levee banks upstream of here to a similar standard to what's in the town area here?
Yeah, really good question. So, I agree. So, I'll walk it back and give you a bit of the history of it, as I know, because I've done a bit of research on this, particularly, I can't see any familiar faces here from the Coonamuda-Barma levy. We've engaged heavily with that community from September. We had a meeting at Yalka about that. So back in the last floods, the big floods in 2010, there was an independent inquiry that happened for flood mitigation structures, including levee banks. So they went through the whole inquiry, and was anyone involved in that? Because I believe there was some Numurkah people that were involved in that. No. So the inquiry basically come to the conclusion that yes, we have these two classes of levee banks. There's, I think they're called primary levee banks, predominantly managed by council around urban areas. And then they come up, this isn't my classification here, but they call them non-priority levies, which are outside in rural areas. Those municipal managed levies, like the ones in town that you're talking about, are managed by the council and they're well managed. Those non-priority levies, and the government of the day come up with this, was that the ongoing maintenance of that levy is the accountability of the landowner that's directly benefiting that levy, which is interesting because communities can be protected by levies. So if you want to maintain a levy, there's two ways about it. If it's on public land, so if it goes through Parks Big Land or something like that, you apply for a permit through the Catchment Management Authority. And if it's on a private land, you get a permit from the council. And it goes back to some of that planning issue that we were speaking about before, about how water moves across the floodplain. So if landowners haven't been acquiring those permits, and I asked a question a couple of weeks ago, how many of those permits had been issued in our area, and it was 2, and I think they've been done in the last 3 months or something. So in terms of levy management, it's probably not that great.
The reason the ones downstream don't look any good either, but I spent over the last 40 years on and off, I've been rebuilding the ones on the New South Wales side. I work for the council there.
Yeah, right.
We've got a pretty good looking set of banks, but it doesn't seem to happen over this side of the river.
Yeah, and I know that there had been some discussion about maybe having another inquiry into it, but that's the politics side of it. From an emergency service point of view, levies are managed under the Water Act. They're not an emergency thing. I've got powers as an incident controller to build and pull down levies. I've got a process to go through. But that's the extent of my authority with levies. That notwithstanding, you know, we did engage with the landowners that were along the Barmer to Coonamoo route to discuss that, and they had they've organised themselves to monitor and manage that levy.
If the river does rise, are you going to let it go into town, or are you going to send it to Coonamoo by boat?
Yeah, look, a really interesting question. So people have this perception that levy banks are going to save us, right? That it's going to hold back the water. And it will to a certain level, because at some point in time, like we saw with Loch Garry, the water's going to go over the top of it. Yes, the levy bank failed, but the water was going to top it over anyway. So levy banks do fail. And here in town, we know that the Dick Spillway is designed to flow over out and around town and through the Makata. That's how it's designed to be. So in terms of us diverting water to one community to another, no, but it is planned to operate that way. Because we have to give water back to the floodplain, because if we don't, the water will just keep coming up. Now, if it can't go out, the water comes up. And that's a real risk for us, because if we've got massive levy banks fail. We're not dealing with a slow creeping flood, we're dealing with a tsunami, and we don't want that. So yeah, if your property, if your house is protected by a levy bank, and I'd argue that a lot of towns here in Cobram would be, still have that planned, because levy banks can fail. It's only going to take an ant's nest or a rabbit or something to get in there. Sometimes it's actually going to take someone trying to do the right thing. They get on a levy bank because it's wet, and they see it's wet and they think it's leaking, and they're trying to fix it, they're trying to sandbag it, but saturation on the levy bank's not a bad thing. That's designed that way. But if we're operating on the levy banks when they're damp, and we start to put our foot in there, that's when it's going to start to fail. So sometimes it's best just to let it go, and we'll monitor it and deal with the consequences if it fails. Because it's people's lives that we're primarily focused on. Yep.
So how long has this weather event been predicted? How long have you known that this La Nina has been coming?
Yeah, so La Ninas, we look at that, I think it's every month the Bureau do it.
No, when was it first predicted out in the Indian Ocean, whatever ocean it comes from?
That negative Indian Ocean dipole. Yeah, so it's about, so they're always constantly monitoring that. It's not a prediction, it's a I'm trying to think of the term. It's only declared when we see it. It's not something we can predict. So they've got all these buoys and all these type of things that are measuring the temperature of the ocean out there. And when it hits that trigger, that's when we know we're facing it. And that sort of started to happen around the start of September. And that's when my team in the Hume region started to go out and do community meetings to get ahead of it. And I think we've done close to, I reckon it's more than that.
So you've known prior to September?
No. So
Just out of the blue, just popped up?
Yeah, that's because that's what happens.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. There's always a chance of it happening, so we're always watching it.
Right, so there's always a chance of this event happening any year.
Yeah.
Why at the start of spring were the dams so full? When every year in Australia we get spring rains that are always heavy.
Yeah.
Why were the dams so full?
Yeah, really interesting question.
And it is a really interesting question, because
so,
now we've got floodgates opening and water's pouring down here.
Yeah.
And I question who's controlling it, who's doing a good job or not.
So I guess there's been a La Nina for the last 3 years.
Well, there you go then. Why,
Yeah, that's right.
over the last 3 years, haven't we been keeping the water levels and the capacity of the water in the dams lower to cater for what was coming?
This land's been flooding for hundreds of thousands of years, right? So
you just said that you've known about this issue, this cycle, for for 3 years. We always get spring heavy, don't shake your head at me.
No,
We always get heavy spring rains that are flooding, right? So why is the capacity of the dams so high in the lead up to spring?
yeah, so,
Why don't you monitor it and let out more water? You know roughly the capacity of water you're going to need for irrigation each year. Why, at the start of spring, were the dams so full?
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. So, the Murray-Darling Basin Commission operates the dams for irrigated communities. So, you know, we're an irrigated community here. We need water for our livelihood.
I get all that.
Yep, good. So, and I guess that the 95% is the level that is determined to be flood mitigation for it, and it's working. They have stopped.
Well,
They've
it's
stopped
obviously
the.
not working because look at the flooding that we've got and all the dams are full.
Yeah,
And you're releasing all this excess water in addition to the rainfall into these communities
Yeah.
that should have been released months ago.
no. Yeah, there's no certainty it's going to rain.
I wonder where it would be now if Marwala was not empty.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting trial.
Yeah,
It only just filled up,
yeah.
and you look at the amount of water Marwala held for us, and it was perfect timing for it to be empty.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Hume would have let water out long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I concur with the statement before. I think they're doing a pretty good job. You know, you've got to strike the balance between collecting water for irrigation, because that's our bread and butter. That's what we pay them for. We pay our water entitlements for that, right? So you've got to strike the balance between flood mitigation and storing water for you know.
They
future
honestly
use.
haven't done a very good job because now the floods are destroying all those crops.
On the floodplain, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so they haven't struck a good balance at all.
Has
And
anyone else?
you still didn't answer the question, why didn't they release more water from the dams at the start of spring?
So you can refer that question to the Murray-Darling Basin Commission. They manage the dams on that.
Alright, so that,
So
I'd like to ask a comment. I think the lady seems to have the opinion that the dams are there for flood mitigation. But the dams are there to store water for irrigation, and sometimes it has to be stored for quite a number of years if there's drought conditions. So they keep it up. They try and get it up to that 90% level so that we've got storage capacity. And as the gentleman says, it's from 90% above that's used for flood mitigation. The dams are not there for flood mitigation.
I realise that, but when they get past that 95 capacity or whatever, 100% capacity, they're releasing it, aren't they? And that's where the damage is being caused because it hasn't been managed properly.
Yeah, I think that, you know, and I spoke about this from the very beginning. You know, it's an emotional time right now. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's no doubt about that. And you know, we're communities that live on a floodplain. There's a flood risk that comes with that. To some level, we have to accept that, and I don't think we can. I think it's probably a little bit incorrect to assert that we can control Mother Nature to the extent that it doesn't impact our lives. She impacts our lives in every way. Every way.
As soon as you put up those damn walls, you're controlling Mother Nature.
Absolutely.
Well, that's right. So you're trying to control.
That's right. But when Mother Nature wants to control us, she will.
Well, 6 weeks ago, I was here at the meeting that they had,
Mhm.
and they said, the guy from the water board or wherever he was from, said that they did an audit of the levee bank around COBRAM. I think it was in 2011, and they identified flaws in the levee bank. Have those, that's 6 weeks ago, have those areas that were identified in that audit been repaired?
So as I explained before, the responsibility for levee bank maintenance is landowners' responsibility to do that. In 2016, when I was incident controller at Shepparton, we put our impact assessment teams along that levee bank. We spent several days walking along it, and we marked the places that we knew had damage. In speaking to the community up there, that information is made available through Freedom of Information Impacts, and I explained that process to the major players up there for that levee bank. The condition of the levee bank at the moment is it is what it is. You know, and a lot of farmers out there have been getting the permits and doing the right thing to do that. It's a bit of an onerous process to go through, but that has been occurring at some level. Whether or not it was quick enough for this event, because as soon as it starts to rain, it's too wet to do work on it anyway.
So how come it hasn't, like how come it's not, like you're monitoring it and you've got a hole in the wall, how come there's not assistance to have those floors in the levee bank repaired instantly? Because if you've got a hole in the wall, the rest of the wall either side means nothing.
Yeah, I think that's probably something to speak to your local member about. Because as I said, I don't. The SES doesn't manage levee banks. It's not in our legislative area. I may as well be up here talking about kindergartens. You know, it's exactly the same influence I've got over it.
So the council's responsible for managing it.
No. The catchment management authorities on public land can authorise the permits to do that. Look, I'm happy to have a discussion off-site here. I'm just really mindful that there's other people in the room that might want to ask some questions, but we can have a chat about that off the side if you like. I can explain it to you in a bit more detail. Yep.
The cod season starting, I know it's not flood, but
Yep.
November. Are we going to stop people using the Murray?
Yeah, good question.
What's the law? What's going to happen there?
Really good question.
They're
So,
going to come from Melbourne and they're going to want to hit
yeah,
the Murray.
I know. And
Lives are going to be at risk on the Murray.
I know,
It's
so-
dangerous.
yeah, I know. New South Wales SES have closed the river, I think south of Tocumwal at the moment. So that's a real issue. But what we're seeing and what we see after floods are those black water events as well that come through. So we see a lot of dead fish in the rivers. It's a real problem.
It won't be safe till maybe January.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course there's a knock-on impact on that for tourism and everything. It's a really challenging time for us as a community. Yeah. Sorry, Greg, did you want to have a chat about that?
Just very quickly. Morning everyone, and I anticipate, my name's Greg Ferry, I'm with Agriculture Victoria. I anticipate there's not too many farmers in the audience here this morning, but indeed I dare say I've got connections beyond 2 farmers out beyond COBRAM, and I've just got some flyers here for a call-in number. I know it's not the most convenient, but we haven't got staff to get out to people, but we do collate the information from property damage, fences, cropping, livestock loss or animal health issues, so animal welfare is our priority, as you'd appreciate, but we do coordinate across to other groups like Blaze Aid or Need for Feed, and if you've got any questions or you want to grab one of the info flyers I've got. The other group we work across to is the Rural Financial Counselling Service, so they work as a service to farmers, commercial in confidence, and to small businesses in the region. So just keep that in mind if you come across anyone as well. So catch me at the end. Thanks, Brent.
Great, thanks Greg. Any further questions? Great, well look, thank you for coming tonight. I hope today, it's been a couple of weeks. But look, thank you for coming. You know, the takeaway message for me is resilient communities endure emergencies a lot better than reliant communities. And we really want everyone to go out there and have your plans in place, be prepared, because we might see a flood the equivalent of what we've seen in other parts of the state here. And the reason for that is that we live on the river. and we can't stop it raining. So thank you very much for your time. We'll be sticking around for a little bit longer if you'd like to have some more detailed questions, but thank you very much. Take care.